Hello, good morning and good evening to all of our listeners. This is the third session for TN MAS Symposium 2021. And today we have such a distinguished guest joining us from different parts of the world. I think it's good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to everyone here. And let me introduce very quickly some of our guests, and they will be talking about some of the projects that they are doing at the moment. First, may I introduce Ajahn Anant Nakkong, a musicologist and also a teacher of mine. Can you introduce just a little bit of the kind of things that you are doing right now?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ajahn Anothai, and greetings for all friends, participants who with us this morning, this afternoon, and this evening. My name is Anant Nakkong, that's Anothai already announced. Right now, I teach at Silpakorn University, Faculty of Music. And I also part-time lecturer at PG Wim Princess Kalyani Wattana School of Music. I practically ethnomusicologist, meaning that I don't work at the school also. So I spend my lifetime do field work. Even in this pandemic, COVID-19, I still carry my recording equipment on street, and wherever they have noise and they have sound, they have music, they have movement, I just record and do publish some work, analyze that into very boring anthropological analysis, and I run weekly radio program which link the things that I record for my field work to my listener. So this is another way of probably how musicologists, ethnomusicologists can interact with the society. So I kind of a reporter in a way. Working in this kind of media from analog to digital for over 20 something years long with no break. So people hear my voice rather than see my face because I really connect to radio kind of thing. And also I run everyday website on Southeast Asia music. So you can also see how I can link this multiculturalism, decolonization stuff with that. And of course, I'm a musician. I'm compose a lot of things for theater work, and I'm the music director for very interesting ensemble. It's called CASEAN Consonant. Consists of young musician from 10 countries, very, very young. And I just realized I can be their father and grandfather now. Today, two of our members just celebrate New Year, and we read 10 language. Greeting, happy birthday in very interesting. We do Google translation, and then after that, I think it's much more interesting than happy birthday in English. So for now, okay, I just stop introduce myself and let other people do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ajahn, and so many different roles, and I think you're a perfect person to talk about the ideas of maybe the multiculturalism in some way. So the next person I would like to introduce is Dr. Christopher Adler, who's speaking to us from the stage. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me join this panel. My name is Christopher Adler. I'm a professor of music at the University of San Diego in California in the United States. I'm a composer and a performer, and sometimes people call me an ethnomusicologist. I think of it maybe like applied ethnomusicology because I've done research in different parts of the world, especially in Thailand, but mainly with the goal towards performing music and making new music, both sort of for myself as well as collaboratively. So one of my big focuses has been on the instrument called the can, the free mouth organ from Laos and Northeast Thailand. So I compose new music for the can. I perform and commission and record works by other composers. And generally, I'm trying to advocate for that instrument to take on a role in the field of the sort of international field of contemporary music composition and performance.
Thank you. So again, another multi-role musicians, composer, performers, and I like to apply ethnomusicology in some way. So, and I know Rei Hasegawa also has a lot of projects that you're doing now. Can you share with us just a little bit? As a conductor, performers, composers, please.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me with this distinct colleagues, guest speaker, and I'm so honored to be here. My name is Rei Hasegawa, and I am a conductor based in Baltimore, Maryland, in United States. Currently pursuing my master's degree in the Peabody Conservatory in orchestra conducting. I'm also a founder and a chair of Moderator Japan, which is a nonprofit organization that promotes diversity of music and arts education in Japan, and trying to provide opportunities for younger people to have access to create their arts, access to some of the contents that have never been experienced in some textbook and school curriculum, and so on. And I'm also an artistic director of a Seminole Music Celebration, which is a small music festival in Central Florida that also explores diversity in classical music and provides the sort of the current education as a musician, how to be a musician of today, self-branding, creative pitching, and trying to think about what we can do as a musician of a 21st century. And I'm again so glad to be here and honored to be here with wonderful guest speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are a lot of things that, a lot of your projects are actually extremely inspiring and talking about creating a new generation audience as well. So thank you for joining us as well. It's our honor. And our last guest for today, Tanaka and Schofield, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanaka Schofield. I'm currently a PhD student at the Graduate Center at the University of New York, CUNY. Here I'm working and studying with my professor, Jason Eckhart, and I'm a composer. So, and for about what I'm working right now, my work's like recently heavily focused on the sonic behavior of multiculturalism and objects, and also geographical sonic elements from different locations in Asia or across the world. So what happened is I would walk around, record sounds, and the sounds that only generated from that place and only in that area. It's not only about the music. Sometimes the way how the objects being created in that specific location, geographies. It has very, very distinguishable sound, and yeah, this is what I'm doing right now.
I think you are the perfect person to answer my first questions then. Since you were talking that you were working a lot about multiculturalism, may I ask, you already answered something about is your work related to any aspect of decolonization and or multiculturalism? Is there anything that you can share with us?
Yes, I always find this topic very, very hard to answer for many reasons. I'm afraid if I say something wrong, something gonna happen to me. But anyway, before I talk about my work, I need to say something about it, just from my starting point. I find that decolonization is not the result, it's the process, and it's something that only occurs when something being colonized. Otherwise, we don't have our decolonized. And for instance, with Thai culture, what we're having right now, it's I'm not sure how much we have this context because Thailand never colonized by any Western power, but mostly we adapted other cultures to us. Also, back to your question, how did it affect my work? I would say both of them though, because I really appreciate like many cultures, and I find like all of them have like very, very unique aspects, and I try to find a way like not combining of all of them, but appreciate all of them. But at the same time, the context of a decolonization, I did not realize until like I grew much older that Western tonality function really harming my music and my ears. So about my background, because like my family, like we used to be extremely poor. Like my family, they escaped Chinese cultural revolution. So when they moved to Thailand, like they were staying in slum in right next to the temple, and so like when they grew up, and also like myself, when I was very young, like all I could hear like was like temple music or heterophony music. So I grew up with that, and then afterward, like something happened. I decided like, hey, I'm gonna be a composer, I'm gonna be a musician. And of course, like it was not Thai traditional music; it became Western music. You know, like from my family background, they did not want me to study Thai music, so they forced me to learn piano and other things. So my ears started to adapt the tonality. But then eventually, like I came across the fact that human ears, everybody has like a very unique ears. It doesn't mean like we have like a high affinity towards to 151, you know, tonal functions. Some of them would have like a very, very high affinity towards to other things. For example, like African people, they would have like high affinity towards to rhythmic counterpoints, or like Asian, like some of them would have like high affinity to heterophony and stuff like that. Yeah. So this is how I understand it.
Can I share some of your work just briefly? Is there any work of yours that you would like me to kind of like share with the audience?
Oh yes, maybe you
Possibly
can start with
the score.
I actually I would ask like please don't share the score, because I have an agreement that I cannot share it, but
okay.
But please share the recording.
Okay. Maybe
Yeah,
I come back to that a little later then.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
In this case,
yeah.
I think it rests quite an interesting point of view, because I think Thanakarn, and likewise, I think he's many few years younger than me, but we also kind of like share the same experience in the way that we grow up, not knowing about decolonizations until getting into schools, even university in some way, and start realizing this terminology and its effects in our lives. Maybe we are sort of like living under its influence so much that we cannot see it. So may I hear just a little bit from Dr. Christopher Adler about this point?
Well, certainly, I think there was that Tanaka, you raised a very important point, this sort of notion of understanding musical experience through one's individual experience, and to not necessarily assume that the kind of hegemonic musical values of one particular culture are automatically going to be something that people understand. And I think that can be a kind of a useful way to formulate how everyone as an individual, whether listener, composer, performer, has to kind of negotiate between their particular individual experience with the reality that these kind of hegemonic cultures exist, and that, you know, like you may not feel much affinity for the 151 thing, but like I always tell this to my students, if you grew up in America, before you were 5 years old, you've already been completely immersed in the tonal language, because it's in the songs that your parents sing, it's in the TV commercials you watch. It's like, so there's the hegemonic kind of cultural pressure is also something that in a way we have to negotiate as individuals to decide like what is our relationship to it. It's challenging. And it's interesting. But in terms of the broader question of sort of decolonization and multiculturalism, I'm kind of with you. I tend not to think too much about those because especially here in the United States, they're highly politicized terms within academia, and they mean different things to different people, some of which are mutually incompatible. And so it can be kind of troublesome concepts to invoke, because you might not be speaking the same language with someone who has those concepts. But certainly in general, I mean, multiculturalism as kind of a basic idea of considering cultures to have, to be of sort of equal value in the world stage, and not presuming that one hegemonic culture or one culture has by default a significantly higher value. That's kind of a starting point for a lot of my music, because I'm so interested in exploring the musics around the world and engaging with them as a musician and working through them and with them. But at the same time, I think it's also perfectly legitimate to sort of grow a musician who just says, like, this one music is my thing and that's all I want to do. I'm not interested in the music of Thailand. And I think multiculturalism away for me means that if you just want to play classical music, that's
I totally agree with you in a way that the terminology, I think, means different things for different people. And for musicians, sometimes when we are, if we are not really working together with sociology, kind of thing, it tends to mean different things. As a musician, we see these terminology, especially multiculturalism, in a more positive way. And while a lot of people are seeing it as a kind of redemption, road to redemption, rather than the positive side of it. May I ask all the same questions, Rui? What do you think is your work related to your experience related?
So as a conductor, we don't really create a work, like a new work, like a composer, or, we don't really, I'm not like a big researcher, so we don't really publish, new paper and so on. But I see my role as a conductor, we have like two sort of big roles, I think. One is on the podium, we create the music. We perform the music with the musicians. We lead ensembles and bring the excellent performance as possible. But also another part of our role is the off the podium. Now that's something that I started enjoying and having a joy as a conductor, especially when we get into the pandemic, because we couldn't perform, obviously. So we had a lot of virtual connections with the people, collaborations, and the product might not be the live performance as we experienced before, but we were still able to connect with the musicians. We were still exploring and discover, such a diverse, music that we have never known. So, and just going back to your original question, my work, so my off the podium work as a conductor, definitely relates to the aspect of decolonization and multiculturalism, I believe. I think one of the examples is that, as I grew up in Japan, until I actually came to the US, I didn't realize how much of our education, music and art education, were very emphasized in the Western way. So we actually analyzed the textbook and the curriculum of Japanese music education, and we have about 50%. We have Japanese music, so choral music, some traditional, instruments, and things that we should know. That's sort of the part of the curriculum, and about 40 to 45% is Western music. In the music textbook, we analyze Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or Schubert's songs and so on. And about rest of it, 5%, it might be just a picture of a little, like a traditional dance from this tribe in Africa, or little picture of or maybe it depends on the teacher. They might let us hear some of the government ensemble and stuff. So that is definitely as a conductor, as a sort of artistic leader of the community, I saw a sort of problem in Japan. So my organization as a Moderator, we want to promote the music is music. There is no really superiority in any ways, as Professor Adler said. We want to create the equal opportunity for people, the voices, individual voices. It might not have to be cultural group, or it might not have to be gender related, but just the individual voices we want to promote. We want to sort of provide opportunities for them to speak out and share their arts. So I think that's what we are trying to do as an organization, and my personal goal as a conductor. We want to sort of promote music as a tool to sort of live harmoniously with others. So my organization called Mudita. The Mudita means it's from the old Sanskrit from Buddhism, and it means the sympathetic joy. It's a joy in other people's happiness. So that is sort of our goal to create, and we want to sort of use music and arts to kind of accomplish, to create harmonious society. I don't know if I answered your question or maybe went too much.
No, indeed, exactly. And I think you're really leading me a little bit onto the second questions. And I think it's nice in a way that you sharing with me this experience of you only realized how much of the Western influence is on your music education. And let me share with you just briefly, because I studied, I first start my study in Yamaha. So from the age of 3 to 18, I was actually influenced by a Western, Japanese version of Western music. So this is a kind of like, it's quite interesting in the way that you can, and it take me like two full years in my master's to destroy the 8-bar format. And this is something quite remarkable in a way. Do you think, I mean, I'm asked directing this question to Ajahn Anant as well. Is it important for like some of people who are living so much under this roof of not being realized that they are living in the culture that is colonized? Is it important to take a journey outwards to be able to see it? Can these realizations, how can we realize this? I mean, to know that we are actually being culturally colonized. Can you kind of put on a mic? Just a little bit? So.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry, I just switched down my mic. I say that it really depends on the person. If you feel comfortable with the happy zone, stay under the roof of Yamaha Imperial, and you can communicate, you can talk with your friend happily with the same language, same breathing, same heart pulse beat, and it is fine until you realize sometimes it is not really your way or your inner spirit, and you find outer shade or outer light, and then you go to that. I think from the question of decolonization, it can happen to any part of the world, and it not just answered by the politicians, especially the country who witness or experience colonization, real colonization before, and when they declare what is it, independent, they ask for freedom. And I work so much with analyzing national anthem of those countries, include our country, Thailand, full of fighting, blood, and oh my God. Even we always say that Thailand never be colonized, but the fashion in composing the national anthem is very exciting. I mean, to compare to outer Southeast Asia, probably Thailand is the most aggressive. Why? What happened? And who make it? I mean, our beloved composer Prajen Duryang, who also very humble people and very happily live with classical music. And at the time that he commissioned to compose Thailand national anthem, somehow all the message in that song text and the music that he made is equally to German national song and outer Southeast Asia national anthem. So the music work. When you think of decolonization, probably it's kind of I don't want to say it's the fashion, but we show the world outside Thailand also pass through this, and the nationalism that put after independent time of Southeast Asia make our country's music is more exciting. So I learned recently, my friend talk about neo-colonization, inland or domestic colonization, and our army, our supreme commander army really make it that way. And the multiculturalism that Ajahn Anothai asked us at first, think also, do we have monoculture? Do we have monoculturalism in our world? No, we never. And multiculturalism always here and there since our ancestor time, and the beauty of the world is like that. I work so much with Southeast Asia music, and I found that in this area very rich in music culture, very rich in music language, very rich in music ideas. You know, the tuning system, Indonesia, of Thailand, of Vietnam, Myanmar, was, and to play Indonesia. I play with my Indonesia gamelan friend, the Ladang Siam, the Thailand song. Probably if you use nationalism ears, the sound really awkward. But if you open your mind and your heart and look at the gamelan people, the Siam means Siam, and it's supposed to be Thailand song to our culture. We which mean how to interpret ภาษา อาจารย์คริส
accent
เพลงภาษา
Usually talk about representation of foreign cultures through music.
Yeah, something like that. But we use Mahori, Pipat, and you know, แบบแปลวง and then we happily play ภาษาลาว ภาษาแขก ภาษาจีน on our native musical instrument, and the composer, the player, the listener, they are very happy to stay in this multicolored music, and they're still in practice the diversity of playing ภาษา in this day. They never do. They don't really limit into monoculture, and at the end they have no real Thai song. Not really playing ภาษา Thai. When we talk about ภาษา in language, in written language or spoken language, it's very limited. But in music language, it's so rich. So this is probably to respond to Anothai as a traditional musician who train, you know, from the traditional ways and traditional ears. We have no problem with decolonization and monoculture idea. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ajahn Anant. I think there's like 3 points that I picked up. I think I completely agree with you that if some people are kind of comfortable in their own music making, it doesn't matter what kind of musical language that they're doing, and taking Plato's allegories of the cave, some people might decide to just kind of like still staring into the dark, and also there's a danger of giving freedoms at a wrong time, or approaching the ideas of liberty in a not so careful manner. That can also be confusing in some way. But I also agree with the ideas of the neo-colonization or I propose, we were discussing something just before, the idea of self-colonization culturally, let's say, and whether what kind of effect it's going to create for us. And I like when you mentioned about the Thai music, playing idioms. I'm not sure if the idiom is the kind of explaining, it's not idioms, but it's interpretations of certain culture using another set of instrument. It also creates a new language in some way, isn't it? As long as it's done with respect and understanding, I think it's still creating a new language. So if I can have a special question for this round for you guys just a little bit, just to ask, whether do you think composers, performers, or musicians, is it compulsory for us to work on the topic of decolonization? Is it, if you are missing this, are you not being responsible as a creative person in music, or do you think we should leave this as the kind of like personal take on this? Some people might find it reverberating to something that they're doing, and some people might not feel that it is something that they would want to tap into. Is it compulsory or not?
May I start? First of all, I think it depends on the work. Each individuals, composers, performers, musicians, artists, what they're doing. I think that is a very important aspect, but in the academy, I think it's very, very important because right now, when I entered the school, like music school in general, it's only classical music. And I think classical music is heavily dominant over the Western culture. And in fact, like nowadays, it's no longer just only classical music. We have like a hybridized music. We have other kind of music and many, many kinds. It's not just one type. And it is like important to allow the young musicians, the young music students to go through this aspect and able to learn that, hey, there are more things. And also like with this, it's not only about like having more options for them, but also like help them to understand what is a true diversity in the music and art itself.
So you felt that it's a bit like Delearning, or
Apparently,
or asking kind of like asking questions to what you have learned?
Oh, this is a good one. It depends on the background too. For example, in my case, I'm Delearning. I have to delearn. I have to retrain my ears because like like composer like us, like especially when I'm telling everyone like, hey, I'm doing a multiculturalism music, like I'm taking quotations, I'm learning their cultures, I'm trying to apply them in my work in a very appropriate way. When I'm saying this, actually there is one knife like pointing to my heart itself. It's like I'm still using score, and score itself is a proof of Western manifestation because like in Asia we may have a music notation. Of course, we may have to record our music, so the next generation could learn it. But at the same time, the notation of music is Western notation, and the Western notation came along with the missionary during the colonization period. And in Thailand, even like since INT-ACT period, what's his name? The French missionary. I forgot his name. Very sorry. I should remember his name. Ever since then, and also like even though we were not being colonized, but I see like this is a declaration of Western powers. And some countries, in some cultures, like our neighbors' country, they would call this as a kind of attack or abusive through the soft power itself. Yeah. So I think it depends on the background. Some of them, if they still peer, they have like not much of influence, then they can learn, like just learn about it and then receive advices or rethink a bit. But for like us, like maybe we have to be learned. Yeah.
Let me stick with your points on notation. I was just attending another event yesterday, and seems like recently, like in the things that in Thailand, in America, or in Korea yesterday, seems like notation is becoming a little bit of a scapegoat for the decolonization. Do you think that's is there anything beyond notation that is creating a problem, or is it just an evidence of of the cultural depressions in some way. So if I can direct these questions to either Rio, Anant, or Chris.
I can speak to that because I'd actually like to push against the idea that Western notation is an inherently problematic thing to be teaching. Although I absolutely agree that if there is a place where sort of a decolonial, or at least a kind of more general, being critical of received wisdom, the place where that's necessary is in education. I'm less comfortable with the assertion that it's compulsory for all musicians or all composers, because I think, once you reach a certain age, you let people go where they're going to go. But when it comes to notation, I think one of the challenges is that in the context of education, Western notation is often taught as a vehicle for asserting a particular set of musical values. But it doesn't have to be taught that way. In other words, like teaching people to read notation and use it and teaching people that Beethoven is great music are actually different things. One of the things that I think one of the reasons why Western notation is so widely used now is not because of Western colonialism, it's because it's incredibly technologically effective at expressing a lot of things, and because it's been continually adapted for centuries, such that like if you show a contemporary score to someone 200 years ago, they wouldn't recognize it as Western notation, but we still call it Western notation. I think we have to be careful about sort of thinking about how something is used versus what it is inherently. I think if education were teaching a lot more contemporary music, then people's values would be much more open-minded towards Western notation. But the problem is they're mainly using it to teach 200-year-old music. So it's sort of a question of what you do with it. I think I still advocate for the use of Western notation, partly because it is a kind of international language, but I also encourage everybody to adapt it and transform it however they need to, because that's what people have been doing since it's been invented. I mean, it's not one thing. I mean, you look at all the changes just in the 20th century, we now accept within the domain of notation all these practices, some of which are more standardized than others, but all of them are communicative, all of them can be learned, all of them can be inspiring to people who, even if they don't know anything about Beethoven. So I think if we can teach notation that way, it is very useful and not necessarily implying a kind of colonization of consciousness.
Okay, maybe I continue.
I was just about
Chris.
to say that.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Since I live with so much of genius who cannot read, cannot write, or cannot really, interpret Western notation or any form of notation. I learned music from the great master like Kru Bunyong, who in his lifetime never touched any piece of notation at all. And he keep compose, every day new music, and very challenge idea when he composed through his practical way, and his music mostly remembered by his fellow and to extend to the listener, and they hungry for his new sound always. So like that, I think okay, probably he doesn't need, but at the end I found that it's necessary to document his work. I make very beautiful book of his funeral after his passed away, and I learned so much of his idea when it's come to notation, and Western notation give us more access to understand, his technical, his idea of composing in very refined detail. So the problem is how much notation meaning to you as a performer, composer, or researcher, or the publisher. People give probably different answer, and after 20-something years after Kru Bunyong passed away, those notation and his music, I come back and see and compare to the people who still produce Bunyong's music in these years. Totally changed, totally different, totally some even make better than Kru Bunyong himself. So how come, what happened? You know, the Renat solo piece and all the Thayoy music. Probably notation that Kru Bunyong make it invisible as first, give him freedom of thinking, and give his student at that time also very, very free of choice to follow exactly or to develop it to their certain needs or their experience. And what happened to us, the researcher, the music historian like me? I still dumped with the paper 20 something years ago from the funeral book, and I keep say that, how can I know Kru Bunyong? How can I really understand him through this paper or to the very fresh music that the very young generation who never see Kru Bunyong but listen to his music so much and practice to his music so much, and they, as I say, some of them even much better than the master when they play music. So the question of using notation, probably we should investigate more and challenge more to the people of both culture. I don't want to say literated and illiterated, but people who really depends on the document, the paper, or the new software of produce notation, or people who really free their heart, their mind, and keep produce music. Where is music means to which side? Okay. Probably I want to talk more. 2 months ago, my teacher again, Bruce Caston, just passed away, and I say to myself, this is another work I want to do, to record his music, to compile his composition, and to analyze him. And I find that after touch a few pieces of his writing, his handwriting, I don't think I can really understand Bruce at all. Even the man who write every detail of his notation of his piano concerto stuff. When I hear his music, when I listen to his music, it's not there. It's not in his handwriting. It's something in between. So probably to compliment to Christopher in that way. The notion of Western notation, how can we really deal with that? But of course, Bruce doesn't write any other form of notation, just Western notation. But what he play, what he compose, what he communicate to us is beyond what on his handwriting.
Actually, there's another point that Ajahn Anant raised about some of the younger generations of who study Kru Bunyong. Instead of notation, but they study by listening. So maybe listening, recording can be a form of notation as well, and or explanations, or there are many different aspects that you can talk about notation. And just before getting to Rio, I have one question, because I mean, for a lot of composers or creators of music, I'm not sure if I put it right to say that we consider it almost like a byproduct of the musical creation. It's not the aim of the musical creation. In some way, there has been, like, for some people, that creating the score, hopefully not the aim of musical creation. And for this case, Rio, what do you think about if suddenly, like, the world are deciding that they're gonna change the way they look at music, or thinking of notation differently from the last 200 years, let's say? Do you think that's gonna affect a lot of your music making activity as a conductor?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It's a wonderful question. My thought is that Western notation is tending to make us universally more perfectionist. I think, one of the things that I realized since I started learning shakuhachi, which is a Japanese bamboo flute, nothing, well, we have, of course, the notation that we use nowadays, but it was created maybe 50 to 100 years ago. It was already taught. And, purpose of shakuhachi, well, there are many sort of, ideas of, this Japanese philosophy, Japanese aestheticism that we're trying to imitate, to create through the instrument, through the music. But, some of the music, for example, we want to sort of, cherish the idea of life and death. The start of the sound is sort of the newborn, like we came to the life. And in the middle section, we are like, kind of a youth, and we are alive, energetic. And as the breath kind of dies away, that's mono no aware. It's another Japanese aestheticism that we think that, so the moment of it dying away is another beauty. And as we stop our breathing, and we have the silence right after that, that's a death. Ma, it's a silence. So, all those things are not notated in the music, but it is totally up to the performers to sort of, think that way. And, we want to bring that aspect of music to our life. And that's, and another example to give you maybe is the sound of nature, shakuhachi bamboo flute. It's supposed to imitate the wind that goes through this, bamboo forest. And, how do we, kind of bring that to life through instrument? And nothing is notated because it was already taught. We listen to teachers and we imitate it. We play it together and we imitate it. And then we sort of, reinterpret it. We become the sound as a performer. But in the Western, notation, we're sort of pretty much kind of stuck with the dots. And, as a pianist, as a conductor, we were taught, do what it's written. But as a conductor, I think that's interesting because, the very little freedom that we can take as a conductor, I believe, is to interpret, again, what these composers were thinking, and then each note has its meaning. And it's almost like, when I play shakuhachi, I try to kind of reimagine like what the note, means to this composer, what the notes, like it did to these composers, and with all the studies of composers' life and so on. So yeah, it's just interesting. I think it really depends on, like Anothai said, the value of how we think music. Like what is the purpose of music? Is it to perform correctly as Beethoven or Brahms wrote on the note, or is it really connecting to the nature, or is it connecting to the this cultural aspect, aestheticism, and becoming the sound of itself? So it really, I think it depends on how you think the music affects you, what it means to be musicians. I think that, that is just my own experience.
Thank you very much. I think it's very important in a way that, as you say, I really love when you compare your experience as a conductor and experience learning and playing shakuhachi. And it's totally agree with you that it's really about the purpose of your own music making. And I think Tanaka would like to add something. Yes, go ahead before moving. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say like what Rio just said is very interesting in many aspects, because like many kind of musical aesthetic from everywhere, like in Japanese music, like the concept of more, or even in Thai music, like when we have done stuff like that, like improvisation and other things, like taking quotations, like all of this aspect cannot be notated, but still is being passed down like through the sense of hearing, and also like the notation, as Ajahn and Nakkong mentioned before, is not like listening, like hearing, like audibility could be a kind of notation as well. And I'm totally agree with that. But things like eventually after, like human, they wanted to record something. I'm not sure we would love to record songs. So we started to develop like this sense of writing notation. And also like I find like written notation. And I find like the new notation we have right now, like the modernized notation, I think it's really, really harming many young composers. It may be wrong for me to say this, but I feel like nowadays, like many composers like this, they forgot that they're not writing score, they're writing sound, and then they only make their scores like to look beautiful, and they forgot like the fact that what is the most important is that for them to listen to the music, for them to listen to what they compose, and this score is only a medium to communicate with the performers, so that reduces like the rehearsal time. I find like in the end, scores work only for two ways, like for learning, for practicing, for communication, and also most importantly for logistic during the rehearsal.
Thank you, Thanakarn. I think you're emphasizing on the point that it can be be really dangerous. So my next questions, I think I will write on these questions as well, and also taking from the inspiration from Shakuhachi playing. And you mentioned about the movement of dying away can also be a beauty. Then let's imagine that we are now at the end of certain sounds. How can we emerge from this musical disaster with dignity? Can you foresee something like, as a composer, as your role of multi-role as a composer, performers, conductor, music makers, music listener? Can you propose, since we are getting into the second half of our discussion today, so let's kind of project a little bit into the future of how can we emerge from these music
disaster? I think there's something of a kind of fetish in the Western classical tradition to declare classical music as in a state of dying. And it's sort of comically been in a state of dying for like 200 years. And so it turns out this is something that is quite common to classical traditions around the world, is that in a way to be a classical tradition is to conceptualize the best times as being in the past. So how many traditions, like talk about Indian classical music, oh, the golden era when they did this, and the best times were always in the past. And in a way, that sort of vision of perpetual decline is a fiction. It's a kind of fear of change. It represents a sort of fear of change. So in a way, I feel like the way to emerge to a healthy sort of musical society is to look at musical society and notice how healthy it is. I feel like the condition of contemporary music making has never been as good as it is now. And I'm not just talking about in the United States. I mean, globally, like the idea of a new music ensemble, the idea of empowering to be creative, the idea of composers throwing away or completely reforming notation to suit their individual needs, incorporating improvisation, studying traditions that are not their local classical tradition or some hegemonic classical tradition. All these things are happening more than they had happened in the past. There's a danger, I think, to some extent, and in some places, that musical traditions may get lost because they aren't socially supported. But I also think those are kind of local issues in a way. It's not a systemic issue. So I guess I don't agree with the premise that we're in a state of sort of decline or decay, but in a way that if we can look honestly at what the conditions of music really are, rather than indulging in a kind of mythology of perpetual collapse, that might be the thing we need to do to help us sort of move to the next generation, where we sort of can embrace music making without saying, but boy, you really should be playing Beethoven, or boy, you really should be playing it the way Bunyong played it. Like, you have to do it the way the old guys did it. It's like, that's the thing we have to learn to stop doing.
Thank you, Chris. I think you've just revealed my third movement. That's wonderful. That's good. Okay, sure. Anant and Bill, anything to add on that?
What about Rio first?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I think just a simple term that came into my mind after I heard your question, Anothai, I think the collaboration in the musical setting is very important. I have experienced as a classical musician and conductor, mostly in the United States. Actually, I had some other former career in Japan. So from looking at the perspective of American sort of music and our society, we think of multiculturalism, diversity, inclusion. And we try to kind of, there's some sense of a movement, at least in the conducting or leadership role in the music society in America, where we try to, bring diverse people. We try to bring in, like a minority or less kind of valued gender, and try to make it inclusive, which is wonderful. I totally support that. But if you look at the leadership role, let's say executive director, are usually sort of majority of people in the United States. Now, we had that sort of similar thing in the past, where in early 1900s, so late 1800s, early 1900s, when we had the access to world exhibition in Paris, and all the composers start writing, like a Puccini wrote Madame Butterfly, and Debussy wrote, La Mer based on the Japanese painting, and which is wonderful. It's great to see that, but again, the creator is a majority European people. So I think we still have that sense, we are in sort of encouraging and promoting diversity. But again, the person who are in control is sort of a majority. Now, I think by sort of bringing in the idea of collaboration, and my colleagues in Thailand, they were doing the collective composition, which I think is really wonderful way to sort of create something as a collaborative setting, are going to be the keys to sort of attack on this very difficult problems of multiculturalism and decolonization, and then it is a very hard topic, because like Dr. Adler said, sometimes it's becoming politicized. But if we can kind of find a way that everybody sort of gathers and have a collaborative environments when we make music, I think there's going to be a little changes in the future. But yeah,
that's wonderful. And
I-
as I say, educations, and of course the environment, the atmosphere of how music is being perceived and supported by people, and not making just in the hand of the few. And I think that's important. And I was just wondering, taking on your point about the Paris exhibitions, I think I really agree with you that you can see a lot of great work. Ravel's, Debussy, and all these guys are creating wonderful piece right after that. I'm just wondering, for those, I have to ask this to Anant later, is there any of the musicians who brought those instruments to Paris exhibition, did they came back and create something new in their own culture? I have to find out this. I mean, Anant, are you aware of, like, does it go both ways?
Yep.
For example.
I think what we learned only from the European side, how music developed, how they get idea from experience, exotic music, and make a new sound, new voice, new idea to their creativity. But it's interesting what Anothai raised a question: what really happened to the musician who went to those countries and came back? And I don't know for Indonesia friends, but I learned that after after the emerge of Debussy music, Ravel music, of course gamelan become the known musical instrument of the world, known music culture to Western people in broader sense than just composer world. So many school, many academic institute, many museum, they bring gamelan into their area, and people not just listen to gamelan music, but they watch the gamelan in the museum, in the exhibition. They eat exotic food with the sound of authentic gamelan music in the Oriental restaurant and so on. So probably it's not just music connect to musician or to a music society, but to a larger world. And if I not understanding, the true value of gamelan is not just making sound. People probably accept Indonesia, the country who under the very heavy colonization of Dutch for 300 something years. You know, when they declare the Merdeka, the independent, the whole world celebrate them, and they just learned how important to be freedom. And after that, people come to Southeast Asia, and they enjoy so much of the beauties of culture of this part of the world. And of course, gamelan is one of the most known music that people remember. And after that, when they have a Vietnam War, probably people learned the beauty of Laos music with the beauty of Thai music and Vietnam music later, and they developed the thing probably in a different sense. It not goes to the classical music side, but they emerge with rock, with pop, jazz, and new music. And probably this part of music history should learn more than learning Debussy, Ravel. Because
in some ways, it's kind of like really expand or expand
especially
the visions.
rock and jazz
Yeah.
music. Yeah.
Yeah. So expand the peripherals of what musical cultures can mean. I'm just wondering, for example, like for the Thai ensemble, Khanak Mahabut, when right? Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Nai But Mahin.
When they Nai But Mahin, sorry, Nai But Mahin, when they went and make a recording. I'm just wondering when they came back, is the way of their, because they have all these microphones everywhere, right? I'm sure that's going to happen. And do they came back and wonder, having the ideas about orchestrations, about balance, and all this kind of thing, was that even discussed after that event happened?
It's not very clear evidence. You know, after the return of Busra Mahin troop to Thailand. But what I can see that the emerge of ethnomusicology subject, the result from the German professor who became very interested in the sound of pipat, the new tuning to his ear. So they want to examine scientifically research to the pipat. So they ask every instrument to give them demonstration, and then they make scientific analysis. Those things maybe not return to Thai music in the direct way. I mean the concern of a Thai musician or Thai music academic people to this, but it's give awareness again to the world in a larger sense. Music is so diverse, and we should learn more of music culture, in not just listen to the song, but not understand the instrument, understand the cause of philosophy, why you have to tune this in different tuning system from European and so on. Yep. And then they travel to the world very heavily recording equipment and record more example of Indian music, Chinese music, and other form of music. Yeah.
So there are a lot of things,
Yep.
actually a lot of positive things that came because of that. Thanakarn, anything to add to that? To maybe the questions, or even with the point that we're discussing now?
Thank you so much. First of all, I find like all the points that bring out by Professor Adler, Rei, and Ajahn and Nakkong, like all of them are very, very interesting. It's very has its unique practice and historical facts. But to me though, like I want to go back to your question a bit. I think like in this aspect though, and also I will add like something about Indonesia too. In this aspect, I find like in human culture, like process of our learning, especially in this like the advancement and recognition, they are like our nature in general, like in order to advance something, we have to look back at something too. So at the same time, sometimes we feel like the music itself becomes like a much better, or some would feel like, oh, something is getting worse, like we're losing something. I find like these are like a very normal process for us, not only to, like to find it's good or bad, but also like for us to learn about each other and learn about like what is our mistake and what we should go forward. So I think we're really living in a good time with technology, which allows us to talk like this, or also like with more knowledge about music from the past centuries and from other part of around the world. And also like regarding Indonesian music, I think that is a proof that now we started to accept other cultures much more than before. And just imagine like back in early like 20th century, like to listen to Indonesian music or even African music, we have to take a ship or fly to those countries. But now we can just like YouTube and we find them, and also like we have like kind of researching like by scholars, by composers, musicians everywhere, and we can read about them too. And also like another point I want to bring is something, I hate this sentence because it's gonna make me sound like a musicologist, but I'm gonna say it. Like the idea of archaeology of knowledge. I find like for colonized countries, ex-colonized countries, this concept can be very, very important, because like we're not sure what happened during like 300 years of being colonized under Dutch, or like under French Empire and British Empire. For so long, like they adapted like these Western cultures, and then these Western cultures becomes a part of their daily routine. So like the concept of archaeology of knowledge would help them to like rediscover. And also like when we speak of archaeology, it's not about like digging out a ground and finding artifacts like ancient civilizations, but also like about rediscovering like the lost knowledge. And I think like Indonesia, our neighbors, are doing so great on this. Like they try to like rediscover who they are, who they were, since the foundation of their cultures.
There are many more things that we can still discuss. With all this, I think we are really lucky to be living in this century in one way, that you can be connected. You can, as you say, the ideas of archaeology, that different takes that you can approach, but at the same time, I think it's important to carry on some aspect, and but there can be more than one approach to all these studies as well. Yes, Chris, please. You're muted. Sorry.
I'd like to pick up on this really kind of fascinating question of what did the people who went to Paris for the World's Fair do? It's a kind of a wonderful question, but it also, in a way, it points to this, I think, the issue of the archaeology of knowledge, and really trying to be honest about understanding cultural diversity and cultural difference, because I don't think we should have any reasonable expectation that the people who went to Paris would come away doing the same things that Debussy and Ravel were doing. Because I mean, Debussy and Ravel are working in a context where there's an expectation for a division of labor between composer and performer, and composers have been working with 150-year history of innovation based on colonial acquisition, sort of stealing ideas from other cultures and making new things, very cool new things, but nonetheless. Whereas the people who went to Paris didn't have that tradition at all. And I would wonder, it may not be possible to know, but are the people who traveled from Thailand, from Indonesia to Paris, would they have even been of the social status where they would be permitted to create original new music that anyone would take seriously? Because that's something that, right, traditionally, not everybody gets to write Thai classical music. You have to attain a certain status to be sort of taken seriously as a composer. Are those the people who traveled? Is it like that in Indonesia? What does it mean to be creative if they were to go back to their home countries? And so I think to see it as a kind of parody and say, well, why didn't they do that? In a way, it doesn't make sense because they're coming from a completely different cultural context and a completely different musical context that would have made that encounter an utterly different experience from the people in Europe, I think. But wouldn't it be cool to be able to do that archaeology of, you know, putting those people in their cultural context 140 years ago and like what would have been reasonable to expect them to do from that encounter?
I think the easiest way possibly is to create another world exhibition and set in that condition.
Yeah, that would be fun.
May I add? Yes,
please go ahead.
probably to respond to Thanakarn and Christopher about the World Expo, why we keep repeat Debussy Ravel history. Of course, they always the World Expo exhibition continue and even in this day, Dubai, but why it's so meaningless to music historian, to the young composer and even ethnomusicologist. I keep watching sometime the Dubai Expo, and we see probably something linked to the gamelan who went to Paris of those days. The function of gamelan music on those days, people not understand at all. They don't really not understand the meaning of music that belong to people of Indonesia, but there's something exotic, and it was very lucky. Those metal instruments stay in Paris during that time. Very cold, very weird atmosphere. But they can still send their charming, the ringing of gongs and touch the heart of Debussy. What will happen if you send can to Paris? But at that time, probably. The world's music history probably will not happen in that beautiful way. And what will happen if the host is not French? If the host Chinese, or the supreme power of the world, or if Xi Jinping, decide to host again a World Expo, and we send everything to China, can you guess what will happen to music of the world, or classical music? Or they don't care at all because they don't really think of cultural value, rather than we can open a new music industry in that country, those country. China is very good with copying thing and produce thing manufacturing in the country. Maybe the creativity of music is not really for composer, but for music business people, for the Spotify, YouTube people, and Netflix people, and Chinese is very good with that matters. Yeah.
Can I pick right on this spot about the exhibition? I think some of the results that we see going the other way around, as to have classical music happening in Asia as a kind of exhibition, a continuing world exhibition, is now that we see a lot of conservatory happening in China. So that can be some of the impact of having a classical music heavily performed as well. So I think that's quite fascinating. This topic is definitely worth another symposium almost. So if I can write on the idea that if the golden age is now, what else, or what would you like to see happening in our musical creation that built upon these understandings of multicultural or decolonization? So that's going to be sort of almost like my last session, my very last question for today. So if the golden age is now, what would you like to see happening in our musical creation?
Personally, I feel like I'm already seeing it. I see more and more, I see composers traveling around the world and creating new music. I'm sort of focusing on composers because of the nature of the festival and it's what I do. But I mean, in terms of music making, there's all kinds of cross genre and international collaborations, and these things are happening. I would definitely like to see contemporary music making and those kinds of collaborative international projects and all those things. I would like to see that figure more into music education, because I think music education tends to operate in a much more conservative realm, and it kind of takes people to find their individual impetus to step out of that and explore. And it's great that all those things are happening, but it would be great if we had a way to show more young people that it's happening and it's cool and it's valued. Yeah, I think that's what I would like. It kind of comes more to education. And then also thinking of the sort of beautiful traditional musics that I find so inspiring around the world. I hope that individual music societies are able to maintain those, and that the cultures in which they're situated can find ways to value them without turning it into a business model, and without turning it into something that must be hybrid and must be collaborative and must be interdisciplinary. And it's like, I would love to know that there's always going to be really awesome shakuhachi players and really awesome Thai musicians that we can hear also. And I hope those traditions survive while all this other great stuff is going on too.
You can have more than one round, so keep your visual thinking coming. Okay, so who's next? Just jump in.
Maybe me.
Please, Ka.
Yes, I keep watching like every day, from YouTube, from Facebook, and then other form of technology that can transmit world music through the internet. So if I can make my wish list, I to respond to Christopher Adler. Not just for music education, but for music technology people. Many excellent musicians, they just die because the technology people, the media people, the camera people, they don't know how to shoot, they don't know how to edit, they don't know how to put the right microphone to the performance, to the new form of playing music in the studio or some home studio. And I just regret, I just feel so sad, in this time of technology fluid, the very advanced internet era, and we have so much of new idea, especially people who make new music during this odd year of COVID-19. But the media killed so much of beautiful music, and sometimes make people misunderstand even more than the time that people write stuff on the archaeology of knowledge that what Thanakarn mentioned. I wish the technology knowledge can be improved, can learn more, and who can be responsible for this, I don't know. It's not from the musician side, but we need make understanding with the media, with the reporter, with the camera people, with the sound people, with the channel who really want to devote their money to explore the possibility of bring good, great music to us. So this is, I think we need to create some new kind of ethnomusicologist, new kind of I don't know who to really communicate to them, to tell them.
Music sharing art is crucial, and there's always economical sort of battles of like you want to put out your arts on the media or YouTube and everything, and how do we support the artists, how do we support the musicians. But I think it's the most effective way that we sort of communicate with audiences. So we open the conversation through those media. And as Professor Anant, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. As he said, the knowledge about the media technology. I've actually seen some of the conservatory in the United States that they started including some curriculum classes for musicians to learn how to upload their videos and how to sort of advertise themselves on the social media, which is, I think, a great change that is happening that artists can do by themselves. But one of the things that I would like to point out, and this is for composers, I've had so many times where I wanted to perform new music by composers, but they are sort of through the publisher company. And I have to pay a significant amount of money to rent the score. And even that money doesn't really go to the composers. It just sort of remains, in the publishers. So, I would like to challenge that sort of a format, and where, composers can sort of move to more self-publishing, and so that we can communicate directly, we can sort of collaborate directly. And I know there's some other aspect of why it's good to have a publishing companies and so on. But again, I would like to sort of re-emphasize the idea of sharing is going to be important for all the artists, and to create inclusive societies as a musician artist. So yeah, this publishing company, self-publishing, I would like to ask all the composers to move it that way.
Yeah. So just cut out the middleman somehow, isn't it? I think it's already not an era of the middleman anymore, hopefully, with all this cryptocurrency in the future. So possibly they're gonna go away, hopefully. Anything from Thanakarn?
The second. When you say crypto, okay. Yeah. This one, I think, from everybody's point of view, is great. And I think that since we're living in an era where all the knowledge becomes extremely explicit, where we can access from anywhere. Also, at the same time, some issue may arise because it's so explicit that it could become something called epistemic violence, which means the knowledge itself, it becomes it could be very harmful to certain group of audiences and people, because they would receive wrong information or a knowledge that would harm another kind of knowledge. But anyway, I don't think that is important, because since now we have a lot of data, we have a lot of archives, so people have ability to learn or relearn. Unlike in the past that we would take so much time to relearn all this process. And also on real point of view, I really agree that that this middleman actually can be very harmful. I think capitalism actually itself is reduce our creativity. Recently I started to hear this term, and it's actually quite true and very, very, very sad. This person said no money, no music, no money, no creativity. Yeah, and also when we do symposium, we do festival, do concerts, or even hiring performers and to do music or artists to create art. It's running by money. It's running, and at the same time, it's running by the middleman, which sometimes they have a very, very narrow point of view or artistic point of view. And I said a lot already. You know what I mean.
Okay, I'm afraid that question requires a drinking round rather than a symposium.
Exactly.
We can have that later.
Yeah.
So just before departing on these wonderful discussion, I think it's really an honor for me to be hearing from all of you today. And I think we really, in some way, I think this is possibly the most positive decolonizations and multiculturalism panel I have had. So thank you for making that happen. And maybe before departing on these sessions, can you give us a little bit of like a small footnote, as Thanakarn just mentioned, about the ideas of that technology can also be a new form of colonization? Can you give us a little warning for everyone who's going to work on these ideas, and how can we approach this with these awareness in mind that we should heed these warnings in our own work? So you have 2 minutes to finish with this. Anything that we should be aware of. Yeah,
I'll chime in. I think the thinking about the economics is a really critical idea. I'm glad you mentioned publishing. I think we've already seen this happen in recording, where this whole CD industry and sort of the way you make money as a musician through recordings has completely collapsed. And then it falls to the individual musicians to try to make it work for them. The same thing is probably going to happen in publishing, because I agree, I've had terrible experiences as a performer dealing with publishers. So I'd be happy to see them go. But at the same time, that idea that we all get, as musicians and composers, the individual freedom to do things ourselves is actually tremendously burdensome. It's hard work. What's happened in recording is that, yes, we all have internet and YouTube. And so now I know, and you might not agree, but the production standards for music are now so high. It is so hard. I mean, I used to be able to make an audio recording. I paid a lot of money to go to the studio and I worked really hard at it. Now I have to do a video with multi-cameras and lights and editing. We've actually created an economic situation which is more and more difficult, while at the same time explaining that we have so much more freedom. So deep down, there is a contradiction that I think is unresolved, and capitalism is not helping.
Anything else from other people?
Yeah, I wish the topic of decolonization, multiculturalism can be more fruitful if we invite more people from economic side, technology side, even the laws, to listen and to share with us. But among musicians, this is great start, and I wish we can put our hope for next generation. And concerning the music technology and colonization, decolonization, independent or not independent or whatever, I still thinking of Chinese friend. They don't have YouTube, they don't have Google, but they maintain the health of their music spirit, their music creativity, and we should learn from them. Even some point we're not really happy with what happened to their life, but this is a new era also. Maybe you can invite your Chinese friend to participate in next symposium.
Anything real? Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of the tendencies that I think as a young generation is that we're becoming sort of having this short concentration span. So as we watch YouTube videos, medias, and we sort of kind of make a judgment quickly, and that might have a potential to result into something what Debussy did or Puccini did, to make things that we learn from online and materialize it, and we sort of kind of own. We want to own into our creativity, and another colonization might happen. So I promote that all those online resources that we have, if we have somewhere that we can sort of start a conversation with artists. I think that's one of the things that I feel the lack. And I feel the responsibility to sort of open the conversation with the artist and, start communicating, start learning, and that will lead into the collaboration as a creative being. And that's something that I experienced during the pandemic, I had no idea I would learn Shakuhachi, but I found this, teacher on the YouTube, and well, it was a little bit more of a story, I started having conversation, and he's now becoming my best friend, best teacher, and now I'm truly learning Shakuhachi rather than just taking Shakuhachi part into something materialized it. So I think the conversation is key to the decolonization and multiculturalism.
Thank you. So thank you for ending with that. And I think we need to keep these conversations ongoing. So thank you very, very much for starting the conversation for today. Thank you, Anant and Nakkong, Dr. Christopher Adler, Rei Hasegawa, and Thanakarn Schofield, to both being a panelist and also organizing this. So thank you very, very much. And speaking from PGM, Princess Kalyana Institute of Music, we would like to also thanks to Asset White, Kunvasini Food Corp, Tacity Ensemble, Mutita non-profit organization, and Thailand Music and Art organization for making all these things possible. So thank you and have a very good evening, morning, or afternoon. Thank you. Sawasdee ka.